mental health enthusiasts. Welcome back to another episode of Ultimate Potential, a mental health podcast. I'm Tony.
And I'm Craig.
And we are here to blind you with science. We have a really exciting guest with us today. We have a brilliant clinician, an accomplished author, and an all-around good human being, Krissy Pozatek. Krissy, welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Excited to be here.
So you've done many things throughout your career, and many things that we've watched with interest and really and awe. But one of your main accomplishments, at least in my eyes, is this amazing book that you've written called The Parallel Process. So before we get into that, which I want to spend a little bit of time talking about today, would you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself, professionally, personally, anything you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I think you probably know my background is in wilderness therapy. I started out as an environmental studies major and found wilderness therapy and went out to Utah and started working in programs. And I just love that nature-based modality. I love putting kids in healthy environments. And along the way, I just learned just so much about parenting. And, I got to see kids transform. I got to see kids really take ownership, reclaim their lives, step back into their power, be accountable, be vulnerable, be leaders, do this incredible inner work, right? Which is like so awe-inspiring to witness. And then I just sort of saw parents not that they didn't want to do the work, right? Like parents are obviously so well-meaning, at least the parents we work with are so committed, but they just didn't know what to do, right? They didn't know how to do the work. And so it's been a really fun journey, actually. I feel like I've really evolved over the years in terms of my coaching, how I work with parents, how I meet them where they're at, and find ways to engage them to do this parallel process work. So yeah, I think my roots are sort of in I love being out. I know you're sort of asking personal too. I love being outdoors. I love being in nature. I live in Vermont. I love, that way of just calming the nervous system, whether it's hiking or skiing or even going to the ocean. I think that's just a big part of who I am.
Did you have an affinity toward mental health before nature, or did your love of nature lead you into the mental health field?
It's a really good question. Honestly, my mom is a therapist, but she didn't become a therapist until I was in college. She had been a nurse when I was younger. So it wasn't like one of those things where it was like I was raised with it. It was just something then she decided to go into social work, and then she went into counseling. So certainly, yes, I was exposed by her, but I also just think I have that brain, you know what I mean? Like I was always analyzing my family, analyzing everything all the time, seeing patterns. I'm someone who's always been incredibly self-reflective, doing inner work on myself, most of my life, I'm just that's just kind of who I am. And so I don't know if I kind of wanted to go into mental health initially because I don't even think we called it that then, maybe. But I think I was drawn to this idea initially of the wilderness therapy, nature being a place of healing. And yes, I kind of knew a lot about therapy and was also, I think, knew it would kind of come naturally to me, if you will. So it just seemed like a fit. But I think starting out with I did start out with adjudicated youth and then at-risk youth. And I just learned a ton. You learn a lot about holding boundaries. You have to be really authentic with kids, right? You can't scam them. So, you learn how to be very real, very authentic, really honoring emotion. So I feel like I got a lot of really good training before I actually ever got my master's or, became a therapist. So I feel like I brought all that into, my schooling, and
Right.
yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm just reflecting back on my early days as a new therapist. This is back in the late 90s. And I'll never forget, I worked at a youth program, an inpatient program. And I remember one of the first families that I had, dad came and, he dropped his son off and his son enrolled in the program and was going to live there. It was a residential program. And I sat down with the dad in my office and he said, Tony, I just want you to fix my son. And
Mm.
I was like, ooh, I didn't really know what to say. I was a new therapist. I was a little bit insecure. I knew that I knew it was more than that. I knew that this boy wasn't a car or a computer that could be fixed. It was a human being. And there was a process. And I knew because I'm a marriage and family therapist, and in my graduate training, they just beat the drum of you cannot take someone out of their context, out of their family system, work on them, and then put them back into the same system and expect there to be lasting change. So I knew there had to be some kind of a process, a parallel process, if you were, that families and parents go through while their child is out of the home going through a change process. I didn't know exactly what that process was, and I certainly didn't know how to teach it and didn't know how to talk about it. That was something I learned later. And what helped me learn that was your book. So
Oh,
I guess I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you became interested in the subject of this parallel process that families need to go through while their child is going through a change process.
yeah, no, I think you articulated that really well. It's almost like we have our finger on it, but we don't know exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've always been like a systems thinker. I mean, I was trained as in social work, not like like as a psychologist. It's so interesting because I have young adult daughters now and they're in college and they take like there's all these psychology classes, that's
Mm-hmm.
like studying the inner psychology, but there's not a lot about like I mean, I guess my point is when I went to college, I don't think there was a lot of like regular psychology classes. You know what I mean? Like I learned about you could learn about education, you could learn about all this other stuff. And I felt like you were naturally looking at like the environment, not just the person. And I feel like a lot of what is in school now is just psychology and studying the brain and the inner psyche, you know what I mean, versus looking at the system. And I think I was sort of rooted more in that like family therapy, like Minuchin
Mm-hmm.
models,
Mm-hmm.
and like that sort of idea of like an adolescent has a problem, they're the barometer of the family, right? They're the release valve of the family. So if the adolescent is having an issue, it's the pressure is being released through that child of the family environment, like they're the temperature gauge,
Yep.
and so that's kind of how I was always trained of thinking about it, not that it's just something in that one child's inner psyche. I mean, yes, kids are complex, we're all complex, we all have there's genetic aspects, there's lots of different things that were our own inner psyche. Like, I mean, obviously I have two different children and they're totally different, right? So they have their own inner being, which is separate from the family environment. But I do think so much gets stuck in family patterns, right? And so and doing parent work for so many years, right? Like I actually ran parent workshops. I used to run these like 8-hour parent workshops way before I became a parent, which is kind of funny, when I was in wilderness therapy. And and so I would do these parent workshops, and you just see that there's it's not in a vacuum that a child has an issue, right? Because a lot of them go to wilderness, they go to other settings and they're okay, right? Or they're feeling like, and I talk a lot about enmeshment, as you guys probably know from my book.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when they're in a say treatment environment, or say like at Chilos, right? They're not in the family system. I mean, they still are a little bit when they get on a phone call or have a visit, but their day-to-day life might be they're operating more autonomously of their parents. And and no one's merging with them. Like no one cares if they did their chore or not, or did their homework or not. I mean, yes, I'm sure they're held accountable if they didn't do their chore. If they didn't show up for class, they're held accountable. But no one's like negotiating with them or attached to the outcome, or do you know what I mean? Like disappointed or trying to get them from A to B every day. There's none of that other noise. It's just whether the child makes the choice or not. And in a family system, there's all these other patterns and all this other like background noise, if you will, around whether they follow through. Like I run a group class, and I had a class this week, and we were talking about how this dad was saying how his son comes home from school and he'll just leave a mess everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then get on YouTube in the family room and not do his homework, and then be like rude, like, what, parents like, oh, you need to clean up. He's like, I don't want to clean up. You know what I mean? Just start that like defiance. And I was sort of saying to the dad, like, on one level, that what was triggering for the dad is almost like this existential crisis, like, oh my God, I'm never going to have a kid follow the rules. I'm never going to have a kid, be responsible. How do I get my kid to do his homework? You know what I mean? It's like parents are carrying this like existential heavy weight of how their child will turn out. Honestly, I think that parents are carrying that like every day for some level. You know what I mean? Whereas like when a kid's in a program, no one's carrying that weight, right? Like the staff are like, hey, how was your day? Or they're not like, how is this kid going to turn out? So I think there's all this complexity in the family system. And so then parents feel it's this heavy burden having a child struggle, and then they may react, and then the child feels the parent react, and then they get power and opposition by saying, no, I'm not going to do my chore. Do you know what I mean? And this whole thing is just spiraling, even though it's like pretty mundane. It's not even that big of a deal. He just didn't do his chore or whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like that small little example I really liked, because it's just that example of how we carry this heaviness as parents, and kids play into these patterns, and so we have to look at the patterns. We have to unpack the patterns. I was just, speaking with another family where the parent had some trauma herself, and, so focused on fixing the kids' trauma. Right.
Yeah.
And, and I was sort of, again, I like to do the reframe of like the one thing we want to sweep under the rug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually shows up in our kids. Always, right?
That's
like, it just is. It's like the one thing, like maybe we did our work, but like it's still coming up. Oh, let's sweep it under. And then boom, right in our face, our kid is presenting that same issue or a version of that issue, right? And I was saying to her, like, this is like a gift in a way, right? It is. It's a gift. It's unpleasant, but it's a gift because it's sort of like you have this opportunity because kids want to be whole. Like, why this kid isn't doing it just to like poke at her mom. She's doing it because she sees these inconsistencies. She sees these incongruencies. She sees, oh, my mom freaks out when I do A, B, C, D, whatever it is, right? And so it's like this, so I just think that, I guess my point is these patterns play out in families, and, I guess that's just how my brain works. I think the older I get, I really just see, I see like pattern recognition. I see patterns. I understand the systems, and it's for whatever reason, it's super clear to me. And I think I have a good way of like mirroring that back to families. And so just to go back to your original point of like fix my kid, I like to say that I think there's a sacredness in the parent-child relationship that we don't necessarily have in other relationships, right? Like maybe we don't want to change for our spouse. I mean, maybe we do on some level, but we don't really want to change for our spouse. Mm-hmm. And we don't really want to change for our parents. And we don't really want to change for our like coworker or our boss or our friend, right? But on some level, we want to change for our kids. Like most people want to give their kids more than they had, right? If they had a closed off father, they want to be not a closed off father, right? If they had a controlling mother, they don't want to be like how their mother was. Do you see what I'm saying? Sure. And so I think there's this like sacredness, this opening in the parent-child relationship to be like, oh, like, hey, this is getting mirrored back to you. And even if you don't want to do this work, like you're going to show up differently with your kid if you do this work, right?
There's some
It's just
really,
a fact.
yeah, there's some really compelling research that I've spoken about on this podcast before, but what they're finding is that the number one predictor of long-term successful outcomes of inpatient treatment with adolescents, it isn't how well the adolescent engaged or whether or not they studied DBT or cognitive behavioral or ACT. The number one predictor is how engaged the parents were in the process, which is fascinating to me. So, in other words, you could have a child who's, semi-committed to treatment or maybe not committed to treatment, but if the parents are engaged and going through their
Yeah.
own process, that child has a much better likelihood of being better, a year down the road or 3 years down the road.
Right. Because they can't just negotiate an out, right? Like, okay, I'll go through the motions. When are you going to bring me home? Or I did this. What are you going to give me? Like, do you know what I mean? It's the parents, like, whatever it takes. Like, hey, we'll be patient. I mean, again, a parent being engaged can look different ways, because the parent could be engaged in like rescuing you know what I mean? Or just like over involved, but not necessarily doing their own work. So I think but I hear your point. Yeah, I think if a parent's engaged and they're doing their own work and they're committed to the process, not necessarily and trusting the outcome will come, it is harder for kids to avoid. Yeah, that makes sense.
After, decades of working with families while their children are in treatment, right? Here at Telos, we have this mindset that the primary patient is actually the family, right? And not the student. And so it's on the website, it's in our admission stuff. It's, it's through all of our family therapies. But yet when I do, one of my roles that I've clung on to since the beginning is doing parent support groups on the very first family days. And the families are still scared. They're just going through this process of feeling relieved that their homes can be a relatively safe place, that they can start to sleep at night again, right?
Yeah.
Because they know their children are safe. And then they start to tell their stories, and it's very emotional. And all of these families that are all, within like 3 weeks to 2 months into this process, they start to bond with one another. But I always direct those groups into, okay, what are you doing? What are you working on? Not in a parent blaming way, but in a parent accountability way, in a self-improvement way, similar to the principles in your book, right? This parallel process. So I have my ideas of what it looks like when parents are on this, this effective parallel process while their children are away from them going through treatment. What do you see? Tell us what maybe the 2 points, the positive points, when a family is engaged in the right things, engaged in the right way. What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think number one that comes to my mind is that they can tolerate their child's distress,
Yeah. Isn't that?
right?
Yeah.
That you have these, I think it's 5 principles of the parallel process, and that valuing struggle is the
Yes.
last principle, which goes right along with what you just said. Yeah, they can tolerate, they can be comfortable with their child's discomfort.
And that is so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
But they're only going to do that if they've come to the other side on their end.
Mm.
And
Do you know what I mean?
explain
And I
explain that.
think,
Explain what you
and,
mean.
and honestly, I'll just share a personal example.
Okay.
My 18, 19-year-old is going through some challenges, and which is like very typical of that age too. And, I want to rescue her, of course.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But I, I'm like, who am I to take away her hard times? Like, I've had hard times. and I've grown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, and I had to get there, right? I didn't get there right away. I had to get there though. And when I got there, things shifted because I was like, oh, like she's going through hard times. I can hold space. I can be present. I don't need to fix, change, control, manage, direct. Like I don't have the outcome to her problems, just as no one has the outcome to my problems.
Right.
Only I do. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, just on a personal note, that's something I've noticed. But I see it in my clients where, like, and the other thing I do is when I have families, so I do home transitions. I do like a 90-day home transition. And when I have parents complete it, when parents kind of get to the other end, they can come on my group class and share their story, which is always helpful for parents at earlier stages.
Mm-hmm.
And this one mom came on and she's just like, bring it, like whatever he wants to bring. Like she's not afraid. She's not on eggshells. She's not, again, worried about his distress. I mean, she's human, right? She still feels things, right?
Yeah.
But basically, like the stuff that comes, she's super empathic. She's like, yeah. She's like, what do you think you'll do? How do you think you'll handle that? That sounds really hard. And she gets in there with him, but she doesn't take it on her lap. She doesn't own it, right?
Right.
She's letting her son own it because he's the one that has the solution, not her. And that's the biggest part of unenmeshing, you guys, is like this. We enmesh because we want to solve their problems, because we can't handle their distress mirrors back to our own distress, right? Or it triggers our own traumas or our own, right? And when we go through hard things as adults and we get to the other side, we can let our kids go through hard things and get to the other side. And I know it's harder when kids do unsafe behaviors. I'm not trying to minimize this, right? Like obviously a lot of kids are going through unsafe things, right? Which is why they're going to treatment. But I do think when I see that energy from parents where they're kind of strength-based, not fear-based.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? They're seeing their child as capable, not as fragile. I mean, and again, a lot of kids are still fragile, but we can still see them as resilient. We can still see that they have capabilities, that they have ability to solve, or they have ability to navigate what's on their path. Mm-hmm. Right. But if we jump in and we're like, oh, no, you can't handle that. I have to get in and I have to like rearrange everything and move it. Right. That's just keeping that codependency and that enmeshment.
Yeah. It's genuinely believing in your child, right? And in the process of life, getting there and appreciating even through your sadness, right? One thing is I like that you use the word distress, because it's normal and healthy for a loving parent to feel sad, right? To feel emotions. It's not that you can't feel the emotions, but it's that distress. It's like something's pushing me to get into unhealthy patterns by trying to rescue or trying to, right? Which is also different than setting boundaries or emotional attunement or the other things that you're writing about in your book. But a lot of families, a lot of parents, I should say myself, right? Or we struggle with knowing the difference between what is compassion and sadness, or even worry, versus distress, right? That then pushes us into doing and saying things that aren't as helpful as what we intend them to be, right?
Yeah, I'll admit it. As a parent, I have 5 children, and it's so counterintuitive because on the one hand, I want them to be better than me. I want them to be more at peace. I want them to be stronger. I want them to be more resilient. I want them to have more. But I also, all the good things in my life that I have, I've received because of struggle. And so I want them to have all these things and more, but I want them to get there without the struggle. Right? I want to insulate them from that. And it's just an impossibility. So yeah, I think that's just such a powerful principle you talk about. So one of the other principles that you mention is reframing problems. the beauty and the power of reframing problems. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that actually wasn't one of the core principles in the first version. But I mean, I certainly talk about it. I think I had a chapter on reframing, but I decided to bring it into the five, make it part of the five principles, because it's, to me, it's everything, right? It's like if most problems are framed as the parent to solve, right? If the child has a problem, the parent has a problem. If the child has a negative emotion, it's the parent's job to get them to happy,
Hmm.
right? And I think that reframing is this really powerful act of handing it back to them and to say, it's not my problem. I mean, we don't, maybe you don't say that verbally because that, but maybe you're energetically saying that, like, hey, you've got skills, or hey, you're resilient, or I know you're good at problem solving. And sometimes kids, and I've said that to my kids, like, I know you're really good at problem solving. And they might look at me like when they were younger, like, what are you talking about, mom? You know what I mean? Because they think mom has the answers, but then they like, the wheels start turning because all of a sudden I gave them permission to solve their problem. Whereas the template before you do that is that mom solves the problem or dad solves the problem, right? And so I think we have to build this template of like handing the problems back and saying, maybe you don't have an answer right this minute, right? But I know you're capable. I know that you are good at solving problems. Why don't you sit with it? Let's check in tomorrow or the next day and see what you're thinking about it.
One of the
And usually kids have some solution, honestly. Like, it's
Sure.
amazing
Sure.
because we're having them not be like passive bystanders, right? We're making them actively taking ownership of their lives. And so when we hand things back to them, that's where you see kids take ownership
Mm.
over and over and over again. And kids step into, what we want them to step into. But they're not going to step into it if we're still owning it.
Mm-hmm. So one of the other, actually the first principle, you talk about parental authority. And I think if I look back over my career and I look at general trends, I think I've seen an erosion of parental authority, meaning parents feeling like they have the right and the responsibility to have a hand on the wheel and to be guiding and directing what's going on. Can you talk a little bit about why is that your first principle of the parallel process?
No, I 100% agree that that has eroded. And I think, I think honestly, my teachings, if you call them the parallel process teachings or material, came from my experience of what I think works in treatment, what I saw work and how I think they can bring it into the home. And it's almost like, think about the staff in a program, right? The staff in a program creates safety. If you didn't have staff, it wouldn't be safe. Like, Telos wouldn't be safe, right? Or if the staff had no authority and the kids ran the show, it wouldn't be a safe environment, right? And so the parents create the safety. And unfortunately, we've used that word authority to think like authoritarian or
Right.
dictator,
Yep.
right? Culturally, we think authority is bad or something. But actually, authority isn't that. Authority creates safety. I mean, if there's a problem in someone's home, they usually call 911. That's an authority. That's for safety, right? Like, authority actually helps us relax. Like the pilot who's steering the plane, seeing him as authority makes you, like, I always say, why would someone like drink a glass of wine and fall asleep on a plane if they didn't trust
Right.
that someone was keeping them safe, right?
Right.
And so this is what parents are. Parents are the safety keepers, right? I actually like the word guardian too. Like, they're the guardians. They get to guard, right, what's safe for their child or not safe. That's the parenting privilege. That's the privilege you have as you become a parent. And so I really am reclaiming that. Some people still don't like the word parental or parental authority. They say leadership or different things, and that's okay. But I like it because I think we need to, it's like anyone stepping into their power, stepping into their authority as a leader, as a, like even as a professional, right? Like being an authority in your field or something. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing,
I think a lot of
you know?
parents a lot of parents feel like they don't deserve the authority because maybe there was a divorce. Maybe their child's problems have convinced them that they don't have the right to be an authority in their child's life. If they feel like they're to blame.
But then who's raising the kids?
Right. That's right. Who's
I mean,
playing the
that's
blame?
exactly what's happening. Is then the child's literally raising themselves, and they're not doing a good job of it because they need
Mhm.
parents.
Right.
And that's what I 100% see over and over is we sort of outsourced. We've like outsourced our parenting back to the kids. Like we want them to agree with the consequence. We actually want our kids' approval today. We want our kids to like us and approve of us and agree with us. And we want their permission. It's like all backward.
Yeah.
And so you have this kid who's most of the kids struggling. I mean, obviously is not an ideal situation for a kid who's even doing well, right? But say you have a kid not doing well, they're struggling, they're emotionally delayed, right? They have impulsivity, dysregulation, you know, whatever, all these different struggles. And then you're basically saying, it's up to you. You make all the decisions. That's not
Yeah.
fair. And I even hear that post treatment. Parents will be like, "Oh, my child's changed, so I don't need a contract." And I'm like, "So you're putting it all on your kid?
Yeah.
Your kid's supposed to come back to this environment and just be different? What about the home being different? What about you showing up different? What about you providing a container and structure like they had in treatment that worked? Why don't we create that in the home so we're actually giving them like guidance and helping them, have that whatever support their gains, like support their gains and their growth and treatment to help it integrate into the home, right? But so many parents are sort of like, oh, I'll let my kid make the choice, and it's like, especially kids that are neurodivergent, right? Like they're overstimulated, overwhelmed, impulsive, right? Lack executive functioning, lack organization, lack natural internal motivation, right? They're not just going to like make a healthy choice on their own. That's why they need parents, and even young adults, still need parental boundaries and guidance, especially if they're financial dependent. And so, no, 100%. I think that we need to step into our parental authority, not as to use coercion or control or shame them. Because I think so often a lot of parents have a bad taste in their mouth around authority, and they just want to then be their kid's friend, or they want their kid to like them, or they want their kid to agree. But actually, when do we relax our nervous systems? When we feel someone else is in charge a little bit.
That's so true.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm on a trip and there's a leader, so I can relax or whatever it is,
Yep.
And so shouldn't like this is what I start to see over and over, you guys. It's when parents step into their authority, actually the kids become the kids again. Because so often that kid is trying to become like a mini adult and power struggle all the rules and I don't need parent, right? And when parents actually set up a home container and set up a contract and have accountability, and they're using what I call choice-based language, they're not using control-based language, and they're doing the emotional attunement, and they're in their safe authority, kids become kids again. Like parents will tell me, oh my gosh, my child just talks to me nonstop in the car now, like they're 12, even though they're 17.
Right.
Or they want to play games at night, or like honestly, I just hear these stories. Like my goal isn't that my goal is to help the kid continue to grow, but then there's this whole parent child thing that starts to happen because they actually now want their parent back.
Yeah. Krissy,
Yeah.
what is not necessarily specific to parents who already have their children in treatment, or maybe it's when they're in aftercare, maybe it's outpatient, maybe families listening to this podcast will never have the opportunity for a wilderness program or a residential program. So this is a general question to any parent that is struggling with a young person who is not functioning and in treatment. What is your number one top piece of advice?
that's really hard to do number one, but I mean, I think it's a combination of the attunement and the boundary. I mean, if I had to say number one, I mean, I do think parents need to hold choice-based boundaries because I think that you know, I do a lot of, to speak to your point, I do a lot of home resets. So like pre-treatment,
Yeah.
like maybe they're never going to go to treatment, but their things are off you know, things are out of control in the home.
Hmm.
And I help them set up just simple boundaries
Yep.
that are choice based. Like if you choose to meet these criteria, get up on time, get to school, be respectful, like whatever, awesome, you're going to have these privileges. You know, if you choose not to, maybe you're going to have more restricted privileges. Like you just, so again, it is a choice, right?
Yep.
It's not saying you have to do X today. And so many kids are like, I'm not going to do that today. But we're saying, and that's where I see more autonomy and I see more individuation, I see more maturation because kids do choose these things.
Yep.
They're not getting any power in opposition. Do you see? Like a lot of kids that are defiant get power in opposition. But when we say you decide, like I'm not attached, of course parents are attached a little bit. They want them to go to school and they want them to do these things. But if the parents detach and we let them be choice based, I see kids choose things more on their own.
Right.
And it allows parents to step out of the power struggle and to step more in alignment and to say, oh, awesome. And then if they don't make that choice, okay, so you made that choice. I'm not mad at you. We don't have to have a fracture in our relationship. But like maybe you don't get Xbox tonight. So that's the boundary. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that helps just create so much stability and disrupt enmeshment and create parents being more neutral in their boundaries. And that creates actually a lot of space for more relationship. And I actually find, and I hear over and over, because you know, kids hear contract and it just sounds like horrible. You know, it's like, oh, parents hear contract and it sounds like horrible. But honestly, so many kids like it because they're like, oh, this is what I need to do to get to full privileges. And all of a sudden, life is clear to them.
Yeah.
Whereas before, they thought to get to privileges, it's negotiation, escalation, power struggles, shutting down. Do you know what I mean? Because the parents are like playing coy with them and parents manipulate back. Parents make deals back. But if we have a contract, it just makes it actually simple. And I would say that like the contract isn't designed to be restrictive. The contract's designed to get you to full privileges. Like we want you to have whatever quote unquote full privileges are. We just want you to regulate, show us that you're regulating, can handle those privileges. Right. So if you're not getting up and you're not doing whatever your basic responsibilities, then maybe you're not getting to full privileges yet. And I think that I've seen kids actually be like, oh, this is what I need to do. Life, especially a neurodivergent kid, like life becomes a little more clearer and they start following it. And there's less conflict. So yeah, I would just say really not being afraid. It's but you have to be in your parental authority to hold a boundary. So that's why it all kind of falls under parental authority.
One of the things we teach our mentors, you know, the staff, the supervisory staff that watch the students after hours and on the weekends, they tend to be in their mid to late 20s, so on the younger side. And one of the things they've kind of grown up in a world that really has enthroned individual rights and individualism. And so coming in, you know, they kind of sometimes confuse individual rights with everybody has the right to do whatever they want. Like that's freedom. That's the American dream. One of the things that we teach them, we call them the 5 mentor basics. And one of the basics is simply the staff are in charge. And I know that sounds really simple, but it's almost like a new concept to them. It's like, okay, so I have to be in charge of this shift. I have to be in charge of the safety of the shift. I have to be in charge of what is allowed to happen and what isn't allowed to happen. And they have to be enthroned with that authority and that permission to set and hold boundaries. And you're exactly right, Krissy. When that happens, students who are out of control and prickly and often feel unsafe, they feel safe once again. I remember we had this staff member who every shift he worked, it was like the Wild West. You know, there would be all these meltdowns and issues, but yet all the kids loved this staff member. And I remember I sat down with the students once when the staff member was gone, and I said, "Hey, tell me about this staff member." And they're like, "Oh, he's so cool. He's sick. He's the bomb. We love him." And I'm like, "Well, why do you love him?" And they're just like, "He's so cool. He just gets us. He relates to us." And then one kid in the back of the room raised his hand and he said, Actually, I kind of feel a little bit scared on his shifts." And I'm like, "Really? Tell me about that." And he said, "Well, it's like we can do whatever we want and it's scary." And then another kid kind of got brave and he's like, "Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, it's fun, but it's also terrifying because I don't feel protected. Anything can happen." And needless to say, that staff didn't last very long in the being employed. But it was just such a great lesson that stepping up, and we talk about rights and children's rights and individual rights. Well, children also have a right and a need to have someone in their life who loves them and cares about them, who feels empowered to be in charge and to be able to make those judgment calls that adults need to make. And so many parents have lost that or surrendered that along the way. And it's so critical. So I love that your book and your teachings um, really highlight that. I mean, so many of these principles are all about a parent feeling empowered to step up and be a parent versus being a peer.
Yeah, I think honestly, that's why parents do resonate with my book.
Mm.
Because on some level, I am confronting the parent. Like I didn't, when I wrote the parallel process, I knew like clinicians would like it or programs would like it, but I didn't fully know that parents would love it, and I think they love it because even though I'm kind of confronting the parent on some level,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's hitting like they're just resonating on a core level of, yeah, I should be like they know they should be holding boundaries, but they've been talked out of it, or they've doubted themselves, or they've lost that authority, or they've lost that confidence. And so I think the book is like speaking to this like core need as a parent, and then they want to do it correctly, right? Because you can be in your authority incorrectly, right? Or and it not go over well. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, yeah, I honestly do think over time, like I didn't always get it, like, but I think it is like, because there's a million philosophies out there right now for parenting and even for therapy. And there isn't a lot of like real robust boundaries, and a lot of ideas out there, right? A lot of ideas out there are actually being like more, I don't know, like letting kids raise themselves, like going back to that idea.
Well,
Let
yeah,
kids.
we see it parallel, right,
Yeah.
with culture, and if you understand human history or governments or whatever, right, there's certain philosophies and attitudes that will change over time, and they swing back and forth. But right now, we're very much into a very empower the children sort of, social media is our parent, and you know get out of the way because I have all my rights. But Krissy, in closing, delightful, by the way, to have you on, and very genuine gratitude, right, your way for spending the last 45 minutes or so with us. As a completely self-promoting plug, do you have, obviously we've talked about your book. Is there anything else that you'd like to have our listeners tune into? Any other resource that
Yeah.
you can point us to that we can put in the little links, so that people can get to know your work even better?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this as well. Yeah, so obviously the book, The Parallel Process, and I do have like a whole sort of online platform. So I have curriculum called Transform Your Parenting, which are really like helpful audios for
Okay.
parents to listen to, and it's kind of like broken down more. Like, so I teach attunement, I teach holding boundaries, I teach stepping into your parental authority, safe struggle. Like, so I'm kind of like walking parents through it more, and it gives them more of an opportunity to practice, and there's assignments. So that's a resource. I have a group class that's twice a month live. And then it's like a monthly subscription. So if you're a member, then you have access to the library, which is like over 140 classes now. So there's tons of content there. It's totally affordable. It's $29 a month. And anyway, so that's a resource for parents. And it's just, I like it a lot because parents learn from each other. Like I told you, I have parents who've completed my transition come on and share their story. And I think what sets it apart, I know there's a lot of parenting groups out there, is that it's not just parent led. It's like, it's from me, from a parent coach, right? Where I'm coaching parents in a group context, which I feel like is very helpful because parents are learning from me coaching other parents, if you will. Yeah. And then I have like workshops and things like that come up too. And I also do home transitions. So that's a whole nother thing. If you have a home child needing a home transition or a home reset, I work with parents in like a 90-day container to actually build that plan with you and help you implement it and guide you through the process to, bring you to a new place in your parenting. Because it is, a lot of programs help you build maybe a home contract, but it like actually implementing it, it's hard, right? It's hard. Yeah. Like a lot of home contracts fall apart. And so I sort of have a specific way that I do it that I've had success with. And I think it's just really helpful kind of having that hand holding if you're really trying to change those patterns in the home.
Yeah.
Well, Krissy, thank you so much for being with us. And am I getting the website right? Parallel-process.com.
Yes,
okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Again, a big thank you to Krissy Pozatek for her expertise, for her willingness, for her generosity in sharing her expertise with us today. Go and check it out. The Parallel Process book that she's written has been really, since the early days of Telos, has been on our recommended reading list for parents. So many, many parents over the years have sung its praises and talked about it as something that's transformative for them. So we're delighted to have you, Krissy. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And until next time, say it with me, Craig.
Remember, mental health matters.
Thanks for listening. Your mental health journey is so important to us. We'd love your help spreading the word so we can reach as many people as possible. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe here on our social media or wherever you access your podcasts. Thanks.